Which is better, the Motorola Moto G9 Power or the Motorola Moto G9 Plus? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hi everyone, this is Kevin here from Smartphone Review Pro, and in this video, we're going to be comparing these two new smartphones for Motorola. Now, the Moto G9 Power was launched very recently in early December of 2020, whereas the Moto G9 Plus was launched in September of 2020. So a couple months apart between these two phones. Now, both of these devices are international phones, so they are being sold all around the world. And if you are in the US, then you are going to have to use these phones with a GSM carrier. Now, it is possible that a little bit into 2021, Motorola might release a North American specific variant of the G9 Power, kind of similar to how they released the Moto G Power based off of the Moto G8 Power, but we'll have to see how that plays out. But here are the boxes that both phones come in. You can see that they do look pretty similar. And there also is a Moto G9 Play that's now out, and let me know if you want me to also get that phone to compare to these phones. Now, while there are many similarities with these two devices, there's also quite a few differences. Now, with the Moto G9 Power, we're getting a 6.8-inch display, compared to a slightly bigger 6.81-inch display with the Moto G9 Plus. Now, with both phones, we're getting IPS LCD displays. However, with the Moto G9 Power, we're getting a 720p display, and then with the Moto G9 Plus, we're getting a 1080p display. Also, with the Moto G9 Power, we're getting a PPI of 263 compared to a PPI of 386 with the Moto G9 Plus. Another difference is that with the Moto G9 Power, we're getting a 20.5:9 aspect ratio compared to a 20:9 aspect ratio with the Moto G9 Plus. So a little bit of a thinner, narrower, taller form factor here with the G9 Power. And then finally, with the G9 Power, we're getting an 83.1% screen-to-body ratio compared to 84.3% screen-to-body ratio with the Moto G9 Plus. But you can see when looking at both of these phones, they do have a pretty similar design. Now, it does appear that the G9 Power is slightly larger, which is interesting because this technically is supposed to be the Plus phone. But another thing to consider too is that with the Moto G9 Power, we have a little bit of a thicker bottom bezel compared to the G9 Plus, but not too much of a difference. Now, both devices do feature hole punches for the front-facing cameras situated off to the upper left here, and with both phones, the front-facing cameras are 16 megapixels. Another thing that both phones have in common is that they both have 128 gigabytes of internal storage. That's definitely a very generous amount of internal storage to get, and both phones offer microSD card expansion. Neither of these two phones have wireless charging, but we do have fingerprint sensors on both of them. However, one major difference is that with the Moto G9 Power, the fingerprint sensor is on the back of the phone, whereas with the Moto G9 Plus, the fingerprint sensor is on the power button. So different placements there when it comes to the fingerprint sensor. But let's give that a try with each of these phones, starting with the Moto G9 Power. So nice and quick there. Let's try that out one more time. There we go, very fast. And then the Moto G9 Plus. And that was very quick too, probably a little bit quicker actually. So very impressive with both. Now, another interesting thing too is that both phones do have Face Unlock. It looks like Motorola actually added Face Unlock to the Moto G9 Plus with a recent update, because when I first got this phone, we didn't have that option. So that is pretty cool to see. And in fact, in my hands-on and first impressions video with the G9 Power, I had mentioned that the Moto G9 Plus didn't have Face Unlock, so it does actually have it. So I give Motorola credit for adding additional features to this phone after it launched. But it is nice that with both devices, we do have multiple methods to access them. Now, taking a look at the back of both phones, we have quite a few cameras on each phone. Now, with the Moto G9 Power, we have a triple camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. And then with the Moto G9 Plus, we have a 64 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So the main difference is that with the Moto G9 Plus, we have an ultra wide angle camera. And I've got to say that it is a bit disappointing that there is no ultra wide camera with the Moto G9 Power. Now here is the main camera on the camera app with both phones. So then from here, with the Moto G9 Plus, we can then switch over to the ultra wide angle camera so you can see that we can fit a lot more content into the frame. Unfortunately, again, we don't have that ability here with the Moto G9 Power, but both phones do have that macro camera, so we'll switch to that on both of them. And this is how it looks. So with the macro camera, we can get very close up. Then from there, we can also switch around to the front-facing cameras on both devices. So there you go. And it actually looks like the front camera might be a little bit clearer with the Moto G9 Power compared to the Moto G9 Plus. So they're definitely using some sort of different technology, or at a bare minimum, they have a different level of software optimization. I'm not completely sure. Now with both phones, we have 4 GB of RAM. With the Moto G9 Power, we have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662. And with the Moto G9 Plus, we have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 730G. Now I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on both phones, and these are the scores. So with the Moto G9 Power, we got a single core score of 311 compared to 549 with the Moto G9 Plus. And then for the multi-core, we got a score with the Moto G9 Power of 1411 compared to 1734 with the Moto G9 Plus. So without a doubt, you are going to be getting better performance with the Moto G9 Plus compared to the Moto G9 Power. Another difference is that with the Moto G9 Power, video recording with the rear camera maxes out at 1080p at 60 FPS, compared to the Moto G9 Plus, where video recording maxes out at 4K at 30 FPS. Now with both phones, we do have 1080p at 30 FPS for the front-facing cameras as the maximum resolution. But out of these two phones, the Moto G9 Plus is the only phone that can record 4K video. Now with the Moto G9 Power, we have a really massive 6,000 mAh internal battery, and with the Moto G9 Plus, the battery is also very large at 5,000 mAh. Now another difference too is that with the Moto G9 Power, we have 20 watt fast charging, and then with the Moto G9 Plus, we have 30 watt fast charging. But now that we've compared the major specifications of both of these phones, let's now take a closer look at the hardware. So I already talked quite a bit about the front panels on both phones. Again, I think both displays do look good, but keep in mind that we are getting 1080p here with the G9 Plus compared to 720p with the G9 Power. And then also, we have a little bit of a thicker bottom bezel with the G9 Power. Now taking a look at the left side of both phones, both devices have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card, and then they both also have buttons to Google Assistant. Then taking a look at the right side of both phones, they both have the volume up and volume down. And then with the Moto G9 Power, we have the power button. And then with the Moto G9 Plus, we have the power button that is also a fingerprint sensor. Then taking a look at the top of both phones, they both have the 3.5mm headphone jack and the noise canceling microphone. And then at the bottom of the two devices, they both have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and they have the speaker. Then finally, taking a look at the back here on both phones, with the Moto G9 Power, we have the triple camera setup and the fingerprint sensor, and then also the flash. And then with the Moto G9 Plus, we have the quad camera setup and the flash, and then that's pretty much it. Also take note that the materials are different on the back sides of both phones. They are both plastic, but with the Moto G9 Power, we have kind of a wavy texture here, and it's not reflective, whereas with the Moto G9 Plus, it's a reflective material on the back. And then you can see it does pick up some fingerprints as well. Let's now do a speed test comparison between these two phones. We're going to start by pulling up the camera apps on both devices. So 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like the Moto G9 Plus was first to pull up the camera. Let's now go to Chrome. 1, 2, 3, go. And the Moto G9 Plus was also faster at pulling up Chrome. Let's now go to eBay. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like the Moto G9 Power is first to pull up eBay. Let's now go to Engadget.com. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks to be about a tie. Maybe the Moto G9 Plus is a little bit faster at pulling up the site, but not too much faster. Scrolling is smooth on both phones, which is great. Let's go to this article right here. 1, 2, 3, go. And looks like the Moto G9 Plus was a little bit faster, but definitely pretty close here with the two phones. So my takeaway from that speed test comparison is that the Moto G9 Plus is the faster phone of the two. However, the Moto G9 Power does a pretty good job keeping up, and in some situations is faster than this phone. So as far as performance goes, I would have more confidence, especially long term, in the Qualcomm Snapdragon 730G that we're getting with the G9 Plus. However, I don't think you're really going to go too wrong with the Moto G9 Power's Qualcomm Snapdragon 662. Thankfully, both phones do have 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is a decent amount and will get the job done. But in conclusion, which of these two phones is the better choice? Now, this is definitely interesting because I know for me personally, having a very big battery is certainly very important. However, it is interesting that I know the battery at the G9 Power is really big at 6,000 milliamp hours, but having a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery with the G9 Plus isn't really that much smaller. So it's really like this phone still has a massive battery, even though the Power has a little bit of a bigger massive battery. So, as far as the processor goes, the G9 Plus is better. As far as the camera situation goes, the G9 Plus is better as well because you're getting an ultra-wide camera. I also like that we're getting a fingerprint sensor mounted on the power button with the Moto G9 Plus. However, it's not too bad having it, on the back of the G9 Power. Also, the display with the G9 Plus is 1080p, whereas it's 720p with the G9 Power. So really, there aren't too many things about the G9 Power that would give me a reason to get this over the G9 Plus. So I would say the winner out of this comparison is the G9 Plus, but hopefully this comparison helped you kind of get a better idea of the differences between these two phones. And then from there, it probably just comes down to which phone you can get a better deal on. Obviously, if the Moto G9 Power is significantly less expensive than the Moto G9 Plus, then that would certainly be one reason to get this phone over this phone. But assuming that they're the same price, I would definitely go for the Moto G9 Plus instead. But again, I hope you enjoyed this comparison between the two phones. Let me know if you have more questions about either one of the two or any other video suggestions, as I'm always open to doing videos based off of what everyone watching wants to see. But this is Kevin here. This is the Motorola Moto G9 Power versus the Motorola Moto G9 Plus, and I will see you in the next video.